Just have a little bit of quiet in the gallery, please. We still have some more witnesses to come. Yeah. I now welcome Mingaan Wiradjuri Aboriginal Corporation and Barrinang, thank you, Lithgow Wiradjuri Corporation as well to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and capacity in which you appear before the committee? And I'll start with you, Arnie Riley.
My name is Sharon Riley. I'm a traditional owner and the Senior Heritage Officer Program Coordinator for Mingaan Wiradjuri Aboriginal Corporation.
Hi, my name is Patsy. The capacity which I'm appearing today is just as a community member of Lithgow and a local Wiradjuri person.
Hi, I'm Rick Slaven. I'm the Vice Chair of Barrinang Wiradjuri Lithgow Corporation, and I'm also a Wiradjuri custodian, and with family ties in this valley for 7 generations.
Thank you very much. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Before I invite you to make a brief opening statement and then we proceed to discussions, would you please state if you are a current or former member of a political party or a union or an investor in the renewable or nuclear industries, please?
No.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
No, I'm not.
Thank you. I now invite you to make a brief opening statement before we proceed to questions, and we'll start with you, Arnie Riley.
Yeah, well, this is all quite interesting as I've been listening to the previous hearing. Yeah, nobody in the community was aware of it until we heard it on the news, which was somewhat of a shock, which has led to a lot of conversations around the community for this proposal. Me personally, I don't agree with going ahead with a nuclear power station. This landscape has suffered enough industrial impact, but it bothers me to think that people will agree to it for a capital gain, which is for the future purpose of future generations, which will have a severe impact on that. I do believe in supporting jobs and creating new jobs for an area of transition, and we've been going through processes to do that for Aboriginal community, and we've just been granted funds for an Indigenous Rangers program, and that's about caring for country and our culture and our storylines that we're connected to through this landscape. So to put a proposal like this forward is quite serious in my eyes, and I look at it because I listen to the ABC radio daily, and this is where I keep informed with things through the radio. But it bothers me to think with what's going on in the world today with the war, what is the other intention with this nuclear power station? Are we looking at heading to World War III?
Thank you.
Simply what I wanted to sort of raise today, I'm going to be honest in saying that I don't understand this enough from a technical perspective to have a solid, informed opinion. But basically what I wanted to say was around my concern of lack of transparency for the broader community to support them in making sound decisions on these kind of things. Obviously something like this topic of utilising nuclear energy, it's quite controversial for obvious reasons. And we can't just sort of rely on media as a source of reputable information. Too often, you know, it's quite normal for people to access their information on topics from the media, but that's not adequate in supporting the general public in forming opinions on these sort of things that affect everyone. And nor is it adequate for people just to be expected to read or interpret a lengthy report. So, yeah, I'm just concerned of the lack of transparency in access to reputable information for the general public. And it's beyond just sort of considering, you know, generating sort of economically viable sort of options. Obviously, there's social and environmental concerns with this too.
Thank you. Mr. Slavin?
Yes, well, what my main worry is, just like Patsy said, is transparency. Because I know 6 months ago Peter Dutton came out with this big statement that he was going to force so many energy providers that they were going to enforce it if they didn't jump on board and all that. But what I want to know is what meetings has he done beforehand? Because these energy providers, they're not owned by Australia, they're owned by powerful countries that take their infrastructure, which they say they believe if it's their country's infrastructure in Australia, they take that serious. And for him to say that they'll toe the line doesn't make sense to me, because let's take, for example, Mount Piper, Energy Australia. It's owned by China Light and Power. So Peter Dutton's basically said, China Light and Power will do as I say if I get in power. Like, get real. Where's the transparency in that? And Mount Piper hasn't said nothing. I want to know where's he getting all this? He's walking around big shoulders, but I want to know, like, has there been meetings going on? It's not just a coincidence, because I was actually talking to someone a couple of weeks before Peter Dutton made this statement, and we were doing investigations our own, and we come up with there's certain avenues where we think people are trying to pull strings to actually get nuclear, because there's a bigger picture involved. People want control of Australian uranium, and I want to know where the transparency is, and I would like to know where all these power stations are, who owns them, who actually owns them, and who's going to control all this uranium and nuclear. And I thought it was, that's just my opinion. And plus, as a custodian, I'm worried about the sickness of the people and the country. And well, I think it's a national security thing. I don't want, you wouldn't have a clue where's the uranium going to come from if they want these plants? Is it going to come from Kakadu, where everywhere's a nuclear-free zone? So how are they going to get uranium to Lithgow? They can't just go carting it free, or they're going to do a state-significant infrastructure, which means that it basically wipes anyone's rights to complain or do anything like that. That's basically where I'm coming from. I just want to know how all this come to be and who's actually pulling the strings and who's got a say in it. And as custodians, like, we basically can't fight nothing, and especially where the uranium's going to come from. I think I know where the uranium's coming from, but I want the government to admit where it's going to come from.
Thank you, Mr. Slavin. I might pass on to the Deputy Chair, and he might be able to help answer some of those questions.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, thank you very much for your time today. Ms. Riley, I might start with you if that's okay. You mentioned some concerns you have about a nuclear power station, and forgive me if I misheard you, but I think you said World War III. Mm-hmm. Can you just explain what it is your concern is there?
Well, just given what's going on in the world today with overseas and wars in different countries and things with China, what direction is actually heading beyond just renewable energy that's really not sustainable and don't create that many future jobs? But then if something goes wrong with this plant, the consequence to our local area, our local community, our environment, our people, how that impacts on us. So yes, it is a big concern on what is actually going on globally in the world.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wolfenden?
Yeah, correct.
You were talking about the importance of transparency, And I think you make a powerful point there, and I agree entirely, by the way, as well as some fair points that you can't just rely on media and, big reports and so forth. As part of the Coalition's plan, we have a 2.5-year period that's been set aside for a comprehensive, on-the-ground community engagement process. And a lot of the questions, Mr. Slavin, that you had raised, all very good questions around, uranium, where it would come from, national security issues and so forth. Over that 2.5-year period, our policy is to ensure that we put the community at the centre, and where there are issues raised, they can be investigated. And answers not given by politicians or even government, but independent institutions that are qualified, so that the community can be fully informed about all the various issues it needs to be informed about. And our announcement about this local community came with that assurance that there would actually be that considerable community engagement process. Can I get your advice as to whether you think the community would make good use of such a process if they were granted the opportunity to have those questions answered?
It's a difficult question to answer confidently, because obviously that really depends on groups or individuals' capacity to be involved and their interest to be actively involved. And like most communities, we have, a varying amount of interest in involvement with these kind of things. Some people that care quite deeply about stuff and want to make a point of being involved, and other people that might feel that it's just a bit beyond their scope and interest and just go about their daily life. So it really would just depend, but it's not to negate the importance of adequate, sound consultation with communities, because that's imperative for this.
And keeping people informed.
Keeping people informed.
Being upfront and honest.
Yeah. Making the information really accessible and easy to understand as well. I think that's important.
Thank you. That's good feedback. Can I take it one step further to get your advice then? Our plan during that process is not to be doing it from Canberra, but to have people here on the ground, engaging personally, locally. Is that the right approach, do you think?
Yeah, there needs to be a lot of face-to-face conversations and meetings around that. I personally don't agree with just giving community, here's a document to read.
Yeah,
Because communities vary with that sort of ability as well and understand what's written. So I think the face-to-face stuff is really valuable to help people understand what it's all about, what it means.
thank you. That's really good feedback. And Ms. Slavin, if I can just ask you, is it Mr. Slavin or Slavin?
Slavin.
Slavin, I'm sorry. I've messed up so many surnames today.
That's
It's
all right.
embarrassing. I'm sorry.
I've been called worse.
So have I, can assure you. So, Mr. Slavin, just your points that you're making in terms of the ownership of different plants and so forth. Our plan when it comes to nuclear power is if Australia is to go down the path of having nuclear power plants, our belief from the Coalition's perspective anyway is that they should be government owned, because ultimately, as you see today as parliamentarians, we ultimately report to the Australian people. If we were to go down the path of nuclear energy, do you think we'd be doing the right thing in ensuring the power plants would be owned by the Australian government as opposed to the private sector, or indeed you were talking about other countries?
Oh, definitely. Like, I'm not a fan of nuclear, but I'm actually, what I observe is I think the amount of jobs that the coal, I know people don't want coal, but I still think coal power is actually the best option still going, because all your renewables, well, they destroy a lot of the country and our totems and all that. But if it was Australian owned, it'd be a lot better, because what's happening is the Australian government's funding all this infrastructure. So basically every time something else happens, it's the government that's funding all the infrastructure, they're funding all the renewables, they're funding this, but all the other countries are controlling the power once it's made, is that right? And which means that they sell it back to the people, the Australian people that are hurting. And when I say, I mean everyday Australians, that's whether you're Koori, you're from South Africa, you're from English, Irish, everyone's got to pay their power bills, and everything's struggling because there's not enough power now. I don't understand why you're just not refurbishing the coal fire ones, because this nuclear, like, we're going to have to buy the information on how to do it. So someone's going to be putting their hand up going, I've got all this information how to do it. I imagine you can't just go on YouTube and build a nuclear reactor. There's going to be people putting their hand out, and the Australian public, once again, is going to be funding it by billions and billions, probably, I don't know, trillions of dollars. But if it was Australian owned, because what I care about is people are hurting. Everyone's hurting, and I'd like the Australian government to own it, and I'd like the Australian government to give all the money back into the country and actually fund stuff. So if you go to a hospital, you got, like they do in Saudi Arabia, and that they don't even pay tax because they're using all their royalties and that to fund the country. And why can't we do that? We're selling, or we're not even selling it, we're giving all our resources away, and it's our resources. And when you're a custodian, well, they're not our resources, but they're part of our bloodline, they're part of our connection to country. And when you see it all going overseas and it's not helping the Australian people, I think it's a big problem. Like, just being patriotic to our country. I know we can't go back to how it used to be, but we've got to protect what we got now. But if it was Australian owned, I think that's a real big step forward.
So, Mr. Slavin, to you and
Final question, Deputy Chair.
No problem, Chair. To the broader panel, you had mentioned the impact too of even renewables, and from the coalition's perspective, we want a balanced energy mix, so that includes still with renewables. But there's no doubt, and we had this conversation in an earlier panel, that once you put nuclear energy in, because it's so dense, takes up a very small footprint, there's no doubt you need fewer renewables and fewer transmission lines. Under the current government's plan, there is going to be an enormous rollout of industrial scale renewable projects, at least 10,000 kilometres of new transmission lines. The renewable energy superpower, where they export, you're looking at up to 28,000 kilometres of new transmission lines. As local Indigenous leaders, do you have any concerns about the impact on the land and on wildlife and so forth, and the ecosystems as they exist today, if there is such a big scale rollout of that type of technology?
Indeed.
You do?
And water as well,
And water.
not just land and animals and plants, it's the water too, the whole biodiversity system. So where we live here is the main catchment area that feeds a few different river systems, and one in particular is Sydney. So it already has severe impacts of industrial contamination. So through research that I've been doing with the university, there's species out there that are already heavily impacted with heavy metals and cadmium, things like that. And if this nuclear thing goes ahead, that's just going to create more, it's more of the silent killers that you don't see, you know? So, yeah, it
Thank
has a severe impact on both water, land, animal, the whole system. So,
Slaven, or any comments about the existing plan and the amount of land it's taking up?
Yeah, I'm totally agree, and all these transmission lines and all that you're talking about. Humans have to realise that you can only kill the planet once. If you're just putting endless kilometres of transmission lines, and they're probably not even owned by us. Doesn't someone else own all the power poles? So how's all this work? And I say to people quite often, my life is worth no more than any animal or plant. I don't. If you're going to cut down kilometres of trees and that brings sickness on country, that's a cultural thing. And you draw on the sickness. If the country's sick, you draw on it. And basically what I feel now is Lithgow's in a cluster of sickness. It's only sort of cultural people that sort of understand it, but if the country, that's why if there's troubled youth in Sydney, they send them out in the bush and then they get all healthy again, because you got to have a healthy country. But just by this, the way they're doing renewables now, it's ridiculous. And basically anywhere where there's wind turbines, you can't find a wedge-tailed eagle. Now, wedge-tailed eagles are my personal totem, but you can't find a wedge-tailed eagle, and that's having a dramatic effect on the Wiradjuri people, I think, but I can only speak for myself. I don't want one tree cut down. I'm always fighting for the totems and the trees, and I'm not a greenie. I've just got common sense that if you go and plant 2 trees because you cut down a 500-year-old red gum, the possums and cockatoos and owls, they haven't got 500 years to sit there waiting for the hollow to grow. So, yeah, so this, the way the government does it, so everyone can just bulldoze what they want and go and plant 2 new little saplings, it doesn't make sense. You can't, it'll take 100 years before the bird can even sit in it. It's money's killing the planet. I just want, we can balance everything, but there is no balance when bureaucrats are going, nah, you'll do it my way. That's how I see it.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Mr Burnell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for providing evidence today. I want to go to free, informed and prior consent and the announcement that was made on the 19th of June 2024 by the Coalition. That's their nuclear policy that they announced on that day. I'm interested to know, was any of the First Nations groups consulted prior to the announcement on the 19th of June and your input sought for the appropriateness of a nuclear power station to be based at Mount Piper?
no.
No. Do you think that it should have been or should have occurred prior
Yes.
to the announcement?
Yep.
So, because I find that a little bit bizarre that it hasn't happened, but what I'd like to clarify is, has the Liberal National Party approached you since the announcement on the 19th of June about their proposal for a nuclear power facility to discuss First Nations concerns within the community here at Lithgow?
No one's approached us, only the invitation for this meeting, hearing, that was it.
So this is the first time you've actually been sought for your
Yes.
voice
Yep,
on your concerns.
on our own country. Yeah, shame job, all right.
Please just be respectful from the audience, please, for the witnesses up the front, please.
Bit of an afterthought.
So when the Deputy Chair says that we're going to engage, that if they are elected to government, they're going to engage in 2.5 years of consultation, what level of trust do you have in that process, given that you haven't been consulted prior to the announcement or during the almost 7 months since the announcement?
Well, zero, until they're upfront and honest and be totally 100% inclusive of engaging with traditional owners in this landscape. So, yeah, they can't be
Any other
trusted
comments?
until we're informed.
The other thing, sorry,
I know you're right. I was just going to say we're just a box tick. So down the track they go, oh, yeah, we consulted with the local mob. They're not going to cross-reference dates to go, oh, yeah, it was 2.5 years after we actually started doing everything.
so one of the things that I'm interested to get a bit of an understanding of is that, so apart from this committee, I also sit on the Joint Standing Committee for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Affairs, and we just recently finished our inquiry into economic self-determination and opportunities for First Nations peoples to be able to have equity stakes in projects and be in a position to seek economic prosperity through nation-building projects. And I would have thought that this would be one of those type of projects where there should be some engagement, where First Nations people do get to have input and the ability to work towards solutions that do provide economic prosperity opportunities for your people in this region, as part of the larger community discussion. But importantly, ensuring that First Nations peoples do have that opportunity to that discussion.
And indeed, and funny you talk about that, because like we've got other industry here like Energy Australia and whatnot, you know, and they've all been talking like Green Spot and new partner coming in, but it's like they've all been talking on, you know, the so-called benefit sharing, but what does it look like? Because we've been promised land, and for us it's like, give us our land back, because we want our land back, and so we can heal our country and our people and everything within that. So there seems to be a hell of a lot of lip service going on, but not a lot of, you know, action taken. Like, here's your land back so you can build your culture centre and create jobs. So it's about us creating employment to improve the lives of our people and giving them opportunities that they've never had. So that's why we went to the bother of going through the process for the Rangers program. Went through the Aboriginal Affairs, closing the gap one to create a bush cafe. So, you know, there's hospitality, there's conservation land management, there's tourism, there's all these things that we can prosper with, but we just need them opportunities to have, you know, if some of these people are saying, we'll offer this, we'll hand it back to us so we can do that. Because at the moment it's just like it's lip service, and, you know, it's like you're being used for their benefit to get through the process. So, yeah, bit sickening.
Ms. Loffelden or Mr. Slavin?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's and I think there's a fine line, because I see on the internet a lot. They get groups in. They want to. I'll give them job opportunities and that, but there's a fine line, because a lot of it is, I call it reprogramming the culture. So someone wants to come in and go, oh, we want to destroy, you know, 100,000 acres of bushland, national park. We'll give you jobs. How about we'll give you, they make them supervise or whatever, but it's reprogramming. They're saying, oh, if you just destroy half of it, you're still going to be looked after by your ancestors, because you're still looking after the other half that you haven't destroyed. They're using money as a bribery tool. And they're not really, and if you do say anything, I just find they just look at you like, especially when you're talking about archaeologists and artefacts. I just think they just look at you like, oh, what do you care? And they don't understand what you care about, and no one takes your word serious. I just think they just want you to sign on the dotted line. I'll go, oh, we'll give your group all this and such, and even if they give you royalties and all that sort of stuff, you're still not, if you go down the track, wait on, that was a birthing tree or something there that they destroyed, they're like, oh, sorry about that. They don't take it serious, I don't think. I think you're just a tick in a box for them. I don't think they... Because I can't even get, I've been fighting different groups for different things and I can't even get one tree saved. It's just ridiculous, the bureaucrats I've got to deal with. And a lot of them ones are the ones that are dealing in the cultural side, actual government appointed cultural protection authorities and all that. And dealing with them, you may as well just be headbutting the floor. They just look at you like stupid when you go, you can't do that. And they go, oh no, it's just the government thing, how it works.
Okay. Sorry, Miss Auntie Riley, you were going to say something in addition.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking, like reflecting on like our needs for Aboriginal people in community and regional areas. And these are the reasons why we went to the bother to do our own funds, like write our own applications, because I'm a strong believer in Indigenous-led, empowering our people, Indigenous women, empowering Indigenous women, but we have to own our own things. And if we keep relying on government departments to be ad hoc on some project, we're never going to have ownership or leadership in our own culture. So for me, it's about empowering our own people to lead those things and to improve the lives of Aboriginal people, to get employment, because a lot of Aboriginal people that have grown up Aboriginal in the region still today do not have proper employment. And I'm quite privileged. I used to work for National Parks for 20 years as a heritage officer. So I've done a lot of frontline firefighting and a lot of cultural conservation and preservation of our culture, and engaged many, many communities to be involved in that. But the problem is the department run that. So I believe it's better that we have our own legs, we stand on our own 2 feet, and that's the only way to keep walking forward, is to be fully independent and grow our own business. So that's what we're trying to do. But we do have to preserve and protect our landscape. And what future have we got if we go, yeah, just build one of these things and then it all goes horrible and then everybody's sick and dying and we haven't got a community left, which will impact on Sydney because they're drinking our water.
Final question, Mr. Burnell.
Thank you, Chair. Just my last question, and Mr. Slaven, you I think alluded to some of this originally, whether it was in your opening statement or in response to the Deputy Chair's question. But the cultural significance of on-land learning for our youngest generation of First Nations people, having a nuclear power station, if there are significant impacts to the area, what's the impact to your people, and the ability to learn on country, to heal on country, to maintain a level of connection?
Access to lands is one. You know, no good taking people out to share with the next generation the storylines and stuff on country when you can't get there. You've got to stand on the side of the road and go, over there is where this occurs. So access to land's a big one. The impacts that it has to different landscapes that have different species that are connected to different story and songlines, things like that.
Thank you.
And natural resources.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that, because a lot of, even the sacred sites and all that, a lot of them are on, well, now they're on sites owned by mines or power stations, and half the time they don't even know there, but we can't get access because where you used to be able to go through, now there's a man-proof fence, and then you don't know what's going on in there, because half the time I don't think they go through all the proper guidelines of what they bulldoze and all. That's only what I observe. I know everyone does the right thing, so they say when they get caught. Yeah, but we've got to have access to country. That I totally agree with Auntie Sharon on that one. It's, but as it is now, it's just getting access to anything.
Thank you, Mr. Burnell.
Thank you very much.
Give us back our land so we can actually thrive in life,
Thank you.
not just survive.
Dr. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if we could have a comment on your feelings regarding the potential for storage of nuclear waste on country.
don't feel good about it at all. Not good.
No.
No.
And I'd be right in saying there's been no consultation about that possibility?
Oh, Lord, no. It's the first we're hearing through this process.
Yeah, I haven't heard
Okay.
nothing either. It's considering pretty much anywhere you drill around here, you're going to hit water. So where they put nuclear waste is going to affect the water table, and depending on where it's all flowing underground, it could affect Sydney water. I don't know if Sydney want to drink radioactive water, but maybe they do. I don't know. But you got to consider all this. And if someone goes, oh, sorry, because that's usually what happens, even on our sites. Something accidentally happens, they just go sorry, and sorry seems to be the way to get out of anything these days. But under cultural law, sorry doesn't cut the mustard. We're a bit harder than that, I'd say. We take country very serious.
Do you have a comment on that one, Ms Wolfenden?
I guess somewhat of a broad comment, but I think it's important for non-Indigenous people to at least try and try to be sort of perceptive of this. But for us, the integrity of our culture is directly linked to the integrity of our natural environment. And it's impossible for us to compromise on that value. We just don't see them as separate, and we don't see the environment as a commodity or anything to sort of utilise in a way that's beneficial for a commodity sort of purpose. So if we're talking about impacts, including sort of storing hazardous material, there's not going to be an instance in that where we're going to be comfortable to compromise on something like that. So yeah, I'm not sure if that directly answers your question, but yeah.
I think it does. I guess the only follow-up question would be, what would it take for you to... We've talked quite extensively in these hearings with other groups about the lack of social licence for these sorts of changes. What do you think your community would want to make a decision about things like storage of nuclear waste in the area, or do you think it's something that you just wouldn't be able to come at all, and that it wouldn't, any amount of discussion and negotiation wouldn't really change your view on that?
I don't think, I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think we would feel comfortable to compromise on this. But again, I just want to reiterate what I said before, that we need sort of adequate consultation and transparent information. We can't just sort of be dumped with questions or decisions seemingly at the last minute. People, the broader public and the community, Indigenous or not, just need to be continually included in the consultation process of this.
Yeah, thank you.
And for that to be sincere as well.
And I think
Yeah.
honest with what it all means and the impacts that can occur from this, instead of just washing it to say it's a great project. But these are some of the implications that can come along with, because you've got to have the negatives with the positives as well. And people need to be able to make a decision whether they agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Thank you for your time today, everyone. If you've been asked to provide